Look at this Russian tank attack. The first tank was destroyed by a javelin missile, causing it to explode and lose its turret. The tank continues to move because its engine is still running, and there is no one to stop it. Then, the next two tanks were stopped by FPV drones and artillery. The crew of the Russian tanks fell into a trap. They are forced to abandon the tanks and try to hide from Ukrainian drones. Meanwhile, Ukrainians shell them with artillery. This time, the Russians were lucky and managed to escape before their tank started to explode, but their attack failed. In today's episode, you will see many unsuccessful Russian attacks and their losses in armored vehicles that have occurred recently. Look, two Russian tanks were about to attack a fortified Ukrainian bunker, but the Ukrainian tank intercepted them and disabled one Russian tank. After a brief fire, the tank exploded. It's obvious that the tank was fully loaded with ammunition, but that's just the beginning. This week, the Russians lost numerous tanks. Take a look at this incident. Another two Russian tanks were stopped while attempting to break through into the village controlled by Ukraine. The drone operator carefully selects the strike point on the Russian tank and achieves an excellent result. The Russian tank shatters into small pieces, and its turret flies off like the cap of a beer bottle. Not far from here, another Russian tank was stopped, and its crew fled. The operator of the Ukrainian FPV drone gets to work. After a precise strike in the right spot, the tank caught fire. Unfortunately, the crew of this tank had already expended most of the ammunition, so there was no explosion, but nevertheless, the tank was rendered inoperable. The Russians send new tanks into battle hoping to break through the Ukrainian defense, but the tanks are not very useful. They don't last long on the battlefield. The crews abandon the tanks and scatter. Look at this case. Two brand new T-80 tanks were abandoned by the Russians without any apparent reason. The Ukrainian drone uses just one or two grenades to ignite and destroy these tanks, and it turns out that the new tanks burn just as well as the old ones. Another brand new T-80 tank was destroyed in the exact same way. Take note of how well protected the tank is. All vulnerable areas of the tank are shielded with mesh, grills, and dynamic protection. But the Ukrainians destroy the tank by dropping a grenade into the open hatch, which Russian tank crews always leave open when abandoning the tank. So, no matter how you protect a tank, if you have a panicked and sloppy crew, the tank will be destroyed. Look at this interesting case. The grenade damaged the fuel line in the tank, causing fuel to spill inside the tank so much that even the Ukrainian drone is reflected in it. Interestingly, the second grenade did not ignite the fuel, but punctured a hole in the tank's bottom, causing fuel to start leaking onto the ground. Only the third grenade ignited the fuel, and it burned along with the tank. Cases like these happen with Russian tanks every day. Tanks straight from the factory are sent to destruction, and most of them do not justify the millions of dollars spent on their production. It often happens that Russian tanks cannot survive even half an hour on the battlefield, while it takes months and thousands of man-hours to produce such a tank. And one more, the last one for today. Evidence that the most vulnerable spot on a Russian tank is the open hatch. As you can see, this tank was undamaged and could have still been useful, but it was easily set on fire due to the crew's mistake. It's strange why the Russians don't instruct their crews to always close the hatch when abandoning the armored vehicles. Russian forces attempted a nighttime attack but were decimated by kamikaze drones. Following the night assault, a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone flies over the battlefield to assess the failure of the Russian offensive operation. Many tanks and APCs burn throughout the night until dawn, but also a lot of armored vehicles remain undamaged and are subject to immediate destruction. Ukrainian soldiers, drone operators, work from fortified shelters. Today, they have enough drones to destroy all the Russian armor. But in the morning, they notice 2 more Russian attacking tanks. For some reason, they decided that after a difficult night, the Ukrainians wouldn't notice them and hoped for a breakthrough. But Ukrainian reconnaissance spotted them prematurely. These tanks were damaged by 2 FPV drones, one after another, and the crews abandoned the tanks and fled. Then, a reconnaissance drone dropped several grenades on them to set them on fire. Over the past month, the Russians have failed to make significant advances on the front due to heavy losses. During one of the night attacks, the Russians lost 2 crucial tanks equipped with mine-clearing equipment. Look how skillfully the Ukrainian drones dealt with these tanks. The drones hit directly into the tank's hatch, igniting it from the inside. Another example that despite reinforced protection against drones, the most vulnerable spot on Russian tanks is the open hatch cover, which Russian tank crews always forget to close. But thanks to them, we can now enjoy burning tanks as much as we want. Later on, those 2 tanks also exploded, leaving behind pieces of molten scrap metal. This is the fate awaiting all Russian tanks in Ukraine, no mercy. In this footage, you can see how Russian special forces on 2 armored vehicles attempted to seize the Ukrainian fortified bunker. Both APCs were attacked by FPV drones, but one of them survived and continued the mission. However, Ukrainian soldiers launched another drone, which led to the ignition of the armored vehicle. After some time, this APC turned into a large fireball. The fate of the crew and the special forces is unknown. Russians often use damaged armored vehicles as cover from Ukrainian drones. Among them, you sometimes come across strange characters. This special forces soldier looks like a character from the movie Leon. Apparently, in his desire to look cool, he forgot that without a protective helmet, he won't survive. In general, hiding behind a burning tank is not the best idea, as the tank could explode at any moment. Therefore, those who are smarter try to take cover in abandoned buildings. But even there, they are hunted down by the ubiquitous Ukrainian drones. When the Russians abandon their armored vehicles on the battlefield, it means they no longer have the motivation to continue the attack. After this, Ukrainian soldiers are left with only one task: to destroy all the Russian scrap metal. And this part of the job brings no less satisfaction than repelling attacks. There are 2 ways to destroy a Russian APC. The first is to fly into the open hatch, and the second is to fly into the rear doors. Both methods work excellently. Indeed, sometimes the Russian armored vehicle may even drive with its rear doors open. However, sometimes it takes at least 2 drones to ignite a tank. And finally, I want to show you an interesting case. You know, Russian military fighters often drop heavy bombs on Ukrainian positions. At the moment, this is almost the only thing that helps the Russians have any success on the front line. Such bombs indeed cause significant damage to the Ukrainians. But recently, it so happened that the Russians mistakenly shot down their own fighter jet. Local residents managed to capture on their phone camera the beautiful fall of the fighter right into the sea. So enjoy, and be sure to give the video a like for this.